Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and this past week has been a bit of a roller coaster ride for game subscriptions, or more specifically for Xbox Game Pass, as the quote-unquote experts go back and forth about its sustainability. I mean, the reality is that this topic has been ongoing for the better part of its life because, quite frankly, its value is almost just so incredible that it's unbelievable. So, when I look at Game Pass, I prefer to look at it from the lens of a fan. I let Microsoft handle the business side of things. That's what they're for. They're the business. I'm the consumer. But this topic always comes up, so frequently we have to talk about it, and today is one of those days as a few naysayers have some mud on their face, especially after today because news broke that's further in favor of game subscriptions. So stick around because we do have a lot to get into. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right into things, though, starting off with Oblivion Remastered. Initially, its hype was just over the moon. I mean, here we are talking about a remake/remaster for one of the greatest RPGs of all time, and I mean, it's still fun to play all of these years later. You can even argue about which one is better, Skyrim or Oblivion. I'll leave that one up to you, but the one thing about the new release is that it isn't necessarily perfect. Its performance left a lot to be desired, and, there's still some hope out there that it will eventually get fixed. Well, the good news here is that they are working on it, and a new update is currently rolling out on Steam. Unfortunately, the console user base will still have to wait a little bit longer, but they claim that version 1.2 will include additional difficulty settings, various bug fixes, and yes, also performance improvements. They said its frame rate will improve in various different locations, and they also fixed various crashes that players were dealing with. Now, as to how much all of this has actually improved, we're going to have to wait and see for ourselves, but we should get more specific details here in the coming days as players try it out for themselves. If you do own it on Steam, though, maybe go ahead and give it another try. Oh, and speaking of an Xbox-owned IP, which is still kind of crazy to think about, but it was just revealed that they will be at the Tokyo Game Show once again in 2025. I mean, they've actually done a fairly good job with their TGS presentations this generation, and really for that matter in Japan as a whole. I know they're not anywhere near as popular as PlayStation and especially Nintendo in Japan, but the Xbox Series technically still has been a big improvement compared to the Xbox One, and this here is one of the main reasons why. Xbox has done a better job at establishing relationships with Japanese studios, and they like to highlight those partnerships at TGS. Seems like every single year they announce several Japanese games at TGS, a lot of which they like to include into Game Pass. And I think right there, that's one of the big reasons to tune in for their TGS showcases. If you like Japanese games and if you like Xbox Game Pass, then, they could have a few surprises in store. The two already announced games, though, that I'd maybe keep an eye on for this year are Ninja Gaiden 4 and OD from Kojima Studios. Now, honestly, I don't expect OD to make an appearance. I don't know how far along he is on that game, but it is an Xbox-published game, so, you never know. Maybe we can get an early look into whatever it is, and with Kojima's mind, it's hard to say, but I, however, would definitely expect Ninja Gaiden 4, which is being handled by Platinum Games. Now, unfortunately, we do have a big game delay to talk about, and there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not this is an ethical decision. Now, I'll leave that up to your interpretation, but we're talking about Subnautica 2. I know the first game was incredibly popular, so much so that the sequel apparently is the second most wishlisted game on Steam currently. That right there is pretty impressive, and it was originally slated to launch into early access later this year. However, its publisher Krafton decided to delay it to 2026, and this is where the kicker comes in. Allegedly, this decision was made against the wishes of previous leadership, and you might think that sounds a little bit strange. Why would the publisher be against an early access release in 2025, all while the developer feels like it's ready to go? Well, this is according to Jason Schreier, and basically all this seems to stem from concerns about a $250 million payout for the studio that was due to kick in if they were to reach their revenue targets in 2025. This delay, however, apparently could impact that target, and that's where a lot of people are looking at this decision to delay it with a skeptical eye. Is Krafton purposely sabotaging their target so they don't have to pay that $250 million? I mean, if anything, it's not exactly a great look, but here's my thing. Ultimately, I think you can view this in two different ways. One is that, yes, Krafton could possibly be trying to skirt their way out of that payout. But the other way to look at this is that maybe the studio is simply rushing the game out, even if it's not completely ready, so they can hit those revenue targets in 2025. So Krafton could look at that and say, well, that might jeopardize our long-term goals because first impressions are very important. If its early access is negatively received, who knows how well it's going to sell in the long run. So they might not exactly be happy about the state of the game that they're trying to launch into early access in 2025. I mean, keep in mind that a lot of times when it comes to early access games, they're not completely ready. So truthfully, I don't think that this story is as necessarily straightforward as some people are currently making it out to be. I mean, I've seen a lot of assumptions, Krafton's this big bad guy, and maybe they are. But at the end of the day, I can also say that we don't have the full story to come to a concrete conclusion. So that's just my point of view, but let me know what you all think about this situation. Do you think Krafton is being shady here, or do you think maybe people are just kind of jumping to assumptions a little bit early? Okay, so let's go talk about the elephant in the room, because this past week has been an absolute roller coaster ride for Xbox Game Pass. Following the layoffs, there's been a lot of back and forth about the sustainability for Game Pass, and this all seems to have started with Christopher Dring, who claimed on social media that Microsoft doesn't factor in lost revenue for their first-party games included in the service when talking about Game Pass profitability. So a lot of people ran with this story. The typical "I told you so" Game Pass isn't sustainable, it's a bad business model, and it's the death of all gaming. We've all heard this for years. But lo and behold, Christopher Dring was wrong in his original statement. He revisited Twitter and said, okay, I need to clarify something. First, Xbox Game Pass is profitable, even when you factor in the lost sales for its first-party teams. Sources who would know have told me. He then continued on to say the sources have reached out to him that even when you include lost revenue associated with first-party games, not just unit sales, but microtransactions, Game Pass is still profitable. So there you go. For the millionth time, we can stop the outrage against Game Pass, or at least for the time being, until we get into the next controversy. But yes, Phil Spencer has said it's profitable, Microsoft has said it's profitable, and now even Christopher Dring has confirmed that yes, it is indeed profitable, even when you factor in their first-party games. Now, I get it. Everybody wants something or somebody to blame for the layoffs and the cancellations. Nobody's happy about what just happened. And Game Pass is an easy target, as it always is, because its value is almost unbelievable at times. The way I view this, though, is that if Game Pass was bleeding them just so much money, as some people like to think that it is, then Microsoft, being the cutthroat company that they are, would have likely pulled it by this point. Now, at the same time, I gotta be realistic about things, and I don't think that it's necessarily met their internal expectations. I do believe that Microsoft wants more out of this service, considering their lofty $70 billion acquisition. A buyout like that doesn't come without strings attached, and we've kind of seen that for its first 2 years. So I wouldn't be shocked to hear that Microsoft has high subscription targets that they want to eventually reach. Now, that is where we start to get into the good news for Game Pass, though, because we also got a report today that U.S. video game subscription spending reached an all-time monthly high in May of 2025, while experiencing its third consecutive month of growth. Matt Piscatella said, "Looks to me that the pressures of higher prices in everyday spending categories like food and general economic uncertainty has folks looking for value." You gotta love that word, value. And this, once again, is why I like to view this topic from the perspective of fans. The price for games and for consoles are going up, all while the cost of living is also going up. So for a lot of people out there, it's not easy to buy into games when they're $70 or even $80 in some cases. Now, if you like to buy your games and if you like to own them, hey, that's awesome. That's why we have choice in the market. But there's no denying that Game Pass is a boon for a lot of customers out there. And I also think the conversation that Game Pass is just destroying gaming as we know it is without merit. There's a lot of games out there that are still selling millions upon millions of copies. And that even includes games that are, yes, in Xbox Game Pass. Look no further than Expedition 33, a day one launch game that so far has already sold more than 3 million units in its first few months on the market. So did Game Pass somehow destroy that game and that studio? No, it didn't. Instead, I can make a very real argument that it helped word of mouth, all while giving that studio a guaranteed flow of money through Microsoft's contract. If you really want to know what's killing games right now, it's not Game Pass. It's not PlayStation Plus. It's not Nintendo Switch Online. No, it's none of these subscriptions. What's killing games right now is the poor decisions that a lot of these AAA companies are making. Long development times, absurdly ridiculous budgets, with poor writing and characters that a lot of consumers just aren't connecting with. What's the two things that both Everwild and Perfect Dark had in common? And you all know that I was extremely excited for those games, especially Perfect Dark. But they were in development for, 7+ years? You want to talk about sustainability for Game Pass? Go right ahead. But what these AAA studios are doing with these long development times and high budgets, that isn't sustainable. Those are the main issues that needs to be addressed in the game industry. Not a service, a profitable service for that matter, that gives consumers good value. These studios need to look within at the decisions that they are making. There you go, though. Those are just my thoughts. Maybe you feel differently, and if you do, let me know in the comments below. That topic went on a little bit longer than I expected, so I'm just going to go and call it a day there. I'll be back tomorrow with some more news, hopefully some good news. But until then, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.